Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Super excited to talk about Jimmy Butler and some fake trades in this video. The Miami Heat, as you all know, have been bounced from the 2024 NBA playoffs in 5 games against the Boston Celtics. Now, Jimmy Butler had some choice words on social media saying that he would have sent the Celtics home had he been playing in that series. But of course, he actually missed the series with his knee injury that he sustained in the play-in tournament, which has drastically changed, first of all, Miami's postseason success that they perhaps could have found this year, but also the long-term picture there in Miami. They have a lot of financial implications this year with the new aprons and the new CBA. The Heat are kind of in some financial trouble about retaining and keeping their core together, and Jimmy Butler has a potential contract extension coming up this offseason, which is going to put them in a world of hurt if they do agree to a long-term extension with him from a financial standpoint, but also if they don't extend him, well, then you risk losing him for nothing, which is obviously a big problem as well. So let's jump into that contract extension. What does that situation look like for Jimmy Butler, and how does that push Miami to move forward in the future? First of all, Jimmy Butler is eligible for a 2-year, $113 million extension this offseason. If he were to sign that 2-year extension, it would wipe out the player option that is currently on his contract right now. Otherwise, if Jimmy and Miami worked out a way to guarantee that player option, they could just tack on 1 year at the back end of his current contract, and that number would be for north of $50 million. So either way, we're looking at 2 years being on his contract, whether it's at the number that his player option is currently slated to be, or that 2-year, $113 million extension mark. Jimmy Butler is poised to get paid. And if you're Jimmy Butler, looking at the past success that you've had with the Miami Heat, you feel entitled to that money. You've brought the Heat to 2 NBA Finals, multiple Eastern Conference Finals appearances, multiple playoff appearances, especially when Miami, think back to before signing Jimmy Butler, they were kind of in a weird period of time. They had Dion Waiters, Dwayne Wade was on his way out. This team was just not in a spot where they were looking like contenders. Jimmy Butler came in and made them contenders, which is obviously a testament to his talent and his skill. But on the other end, if you're Miami, you don't want to just pay a guy for past production. Anytime you're signing someone to a contract, you want to pay for what you're going to get throughout the duration of that contract instead. And Jimmy Butler, well, he turns 35 years old before the start of next season. So in September, Jimmy Butler will be 35 years old, which obviously, if you're Miami, probably scares you a little bit. Do you want to give him $113 million over 2 years into his age 36 and age 37 season? That's a big question. And then there's also the kind of implications around, well, he always turns up in the playoffs. I have a question about Miami. Listen, we know they have a pretty good roster and obviously a great head coach, arguably the best head coach in the NBA. Do they overperform in the postseason, or do they just flat out underperform in the regular season? The last 2 years, they've been 1 loss away from completely missing the playoffs. You think back to their play-in games. Obviously, they've made it in both years. Last year, they had a crazy trip to the NBA Finals, set NBA history by being an 8 seed and getting all the way there. It's crazy. But the reality is, with Jimmy Butler, yes, he's a playoff riser, but he's also kind of a regular season sleeper. And he doesn't really, I think, enact his talent or utilize his talent to its fullest. And as a result, the Heat have been a kind of poor regular season team despite being a very good roster with a great head coach. So if you're Pat Riley and if you're Miami Heat's front office, you say, yes, Jimmy, you've had some awesome playoff moments for us, but at the same time, you've kind of underperformed in the regular season for where we want to be. And because of that, we had to face the Boston Celtics in round 1 this year, whereas maybe we could have drawn the Magic or the Cavs and had an easier pathway to the second round and beyond this postseason. So I think if you're the Miami Heat front office, there's a lot of reasons to be hesitant about giving Jimmy Butler a massive extension despite everything he has done for that organization, which is where we're going to see some trepidation on both sides. Butler's going to want all the money. The Heat are going to be a little hesitant to give it to him, which leads us to the big question. Does Miami commit to Butler long term? Do they play out the rest of his contract and risk losing him for nothing later on? Or do they just flat out trade him this summer, try and maximize his value? Because the reality is, Miami has probably gotten the best out of Jimmy Butler. If you think back to 2019 when they signed him, I don't even know if anyone would have expected that team to make 2 NBA Finals and to be as good and as mainstream as they have been in the Eastern Conference playoffs. So Jimmy Butler has given everything possible to this Heat team. Is there a way that Miami can look at it and say, look, this went better than we could have expected? Let's enjoy that we've had this, maybe ride it out with him, or we're willing to move on from him because we don't expect anything better to come in the future. And that's really, I think, the big question here is, what does Miami really internally want to do with Jimmy Butler if he's not willing to take less than that 2-year, $113 million max extension? Because that is a lot of money to commit to a player who's going to be in his mid to late 30s by the end of that contract. So let's talk about some trades. I have 5 different trades to talk about. The first one here is not the most realistic one. Okay, these trades get more and more realistic as we go throughout the video, so bear with me through some of these early ones. I just wanted to be as encompassing as possible of as many teams as possible in this video. I found 5 trades that I liked. One of them does not include the Los Angeles Lakers. I can't see Pat Riley trading Jimmy Butler to help LeBron James out. I just don't really see that. So instead, he's going to trade him to the in-city rival, the Los Angeles Clippers, here in what would be a sign and trade for Paul George. The Clippers, their experiment with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, as smart as it was at the time, as surefire as it seemed, first of all, I would go back and do it 100 times over. I think that this has been the worst possible result for the Clippers. Only 3 playoff series wins in the 5 years with PG and Kawhi on the roster. A lot of that stems from Kawhi's injuries in the postseason, a lot of bad luck in there. Then obviously just some reality that the Clippers have faded in some big moments. You think back to the bubble, Paul George completely melted at the end of that series against the Denver Nuggets. There have been a lot of negatives as well throughout that time. So it's not just all injury luck and it's not just bad luck for the Clippers. There's also, you know, the players play a role in that as well. But there has been a ton of bad luck. And I think the Clippers, if they're looking to kind of shake things up and completely reshuffle the deck to try and win with Kawhi Leonard, this is maybe one of their best ways to go about it. This could be a 3-year sign and trade where Paul George gets a ton of money for the next 3 years. He is 1 year younger than Jimmy Butler, and maybe his play style fits into Miami's offense now with Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero a little bit cleaner because he's a better off-ball shooter, someone who spaces the floor a little bit more, but obviously still has some of that creation potential that Jimmy Butler brings to Miami's offense as well. And I would say even at a higher volume, Butler obviously brings more of that intensity and is a better playoff performer at times than Paul George. But I could see Miami looking into something like this if they're kind of gun-shy on committing to Jimmy long-term. You turn him into Paul George, you also get a couple of second-round picks. And the Clippers, ironically, get a player they could have signed in 2019. Remember, they opened up a lot of max cap space. They had the cap space to sign Kawhi Leonard, and had they salary dumped Danilo Gallinari somewhere that offseason, they could have actually probably had a second max slot where they could have went out and just flat out signed Jimmy Butler. My best friend is a Los Angeles Clippers fan, and that whole offseason, as they kind of waited for the Kawhi Leonard decision, he lamented his desire to have both Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard on their roster without trading Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. If you think about how that could have played out, it could have been phenomenal for the Clippers if they were able to pull that off. And now this is their opportunity to maybe land Butler in a trade centered around Paul George going to Miami. This would be under the idea that the Clippers do keep James Harden. So you go into next postseason with Harden, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, and you hope that, well, if Kawhi Leonard gets hurt again, or if James Harden has, you know, a bad end to a series like he has had in the past a few times, Jimmy Butler and his greatness in the postseason can maybe elevate this Clippers team to heights that they haven't gotten to with Paul George on the roster. So Jimmy Butler is obviously the big swing factor here for the Clippers. And for Miami, you're getting a year younger. You're signing Paul George to a 3-year contract on a sign and trade. So there's still not that super long-term commitment where you're going to be hurting financially on the back end of that contract. But the money would also be a little bit cheaper than Jimmy Butler's likely, which is where things could make some good deal of sense for Miami. Now again, this is the least likely trade in this entire video, so if you don't think this one's super likely, don't worry. Let's get into trade number 2 now, and it's with the Golden State Warriors. And this is a move from Golden State to go all in one final time with Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. They give up a decent amount here to go get Jimmy Butler. But I do think this makes some sense for both sides. First of all, the most important thing, the Warriors actually shave off $400,000 from their cap table. And you might say, well, that's not really that big of a deal. It is, based on where they are with the aprons. They actually have to take in less money than they send out. That is the reality with the new CBA. There are trade restrictions that will limit Golden State's flexibility. So this deal, they have to include these 4 players essentially to bring in Jimmy Butler's contract at this point. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins, and if there's a team that's going to make Andrew Wiggins work at a very consistent and high level, I really do believe it would be Miami. I feel like their culture, Spoelstra would probably maximize Andrew Wiggins. There is still a lot of talent there. Now, I know he had a very bad season for the Warriors this past year, but 2 years ago, and their run in 2022 specifically, he was phenomenal. So I'm not fully out on Andrew Wiggins yet. Now, I don't think he's a super net positive in a trade. I don't think teams are like, oh, let's go get Andrew Wiggins. But what I do think is he does have some value, and I do think in Miami specifically they could maximize his talent. You also get Gary Payton II, who just seems kind of like a Miami Heat player, honestly. Someone who's a high energy, a high effort guy, would probably do a lot of wonders there for the Heat. Kevon Looney is a backup big man for Miami behind Bam Adebayo, and actually one of the better options for Miami to add into their backup front court. One thing about the Heat, they're a little small, especially off the bench. I think Looney, who's not a huge body, but he plays bigger than he is both on the glass and as a screen setter. He could fit very well into Miami's offense with Duncan Robinson, with Tyler Hero, as a very poor man's version of Bam Adebayo. He likes to go into dribble handoffs a ton. Now, he doesn't have very much rim gravity. He's not a good offensive player other than his ability to set screens. So Looney, there are some positives here for Miami. It's not like a home run get for them, but it's a, hey, this guy could play a role for us. And then Moses Moody is kind of the centerpiece of the trade here from a young player perspective. Has really flashed when he has received minutes from Steve Kerr. Now, obviously, the role hasn't been there consistently for him under Kerr. Obviously, that's something Warriors fans have really been frustrated by over the last couple of years, is Kerr's rotations and his lack of willingness to consistently play the young guys. I do think Moody could be a very good player in the NBA, though, and I think Miami especially could really maximize him and find some use out of him in that backcourt. They also get 2 fully unprotected first-round picks. So this is a bet from Pat Riley that the Warriors, who already missed the playoffs this year, with an aging roster, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, now you add in a 34, about to be 35-year-old Jimmy Butler, that by the year 2026 and by the year 2028 especially, the Golden State Warriors have probably flopped and have found themselves at the bottom of the conference, and you're looking at perhaps a top 5, top 10 pick. And from the Warriors' perspective, it's, hey, we're going all in. We have a generational one-of-one player ever in Stephen Curry. We have to try our best to win around him. And you don't have to sacrifice Jonathan Kuminga in this trade, which is a huge win for the Warriors. And you get Jimmy Butler. The Warriors already moved to small ball last year, playing Draymond Green at center. They found some decent success in that regard. Now you're just upgrading the Wiggins minutes into Jimmy Butler minutes. It is a substantial step in the right direction for Golden State from a overall talent standpoint. Now, this does thin them out quite a bit. This is also one of the positives for Miami. They replenish a lot of their depth that they're just slated to lose because of their current cap space situation and where they're at with the aprons. So Miami gets a collection of players that can play in their rotation and draft choices. The Warriors make one final big swing move to get Jimmy Butler there next to Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and you still have Kuminga. So you have this very switchy lineup, a lot of length and a lot of talent. Does that win in the Western Conference against Nikola Jokic, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns? Does that win? That's going to be a tough answer. That's one I'm not sure about for Golden State. But this is an upside move for them, that they're trying to put all their chips in on winning one more title with Steph Curry. Trade number 3, we look at a deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder, everyone's favorite team to mock in trades because they have basically half of the league's draft picks over the next 5 or so years. But the Thunder get Jimmy Butler here in this deal. This is a massive win now move for them, but it doesn't really sacrifice too much of their long-term flexibility. They do give up Josh Giddey in this trade. Obviously, there was some off-the-court stuff that I think has caused a little bit of, issue with the PR, especially around the Oklahoma City Thunder, the way people perceive them as an organization. So trading him might be beneficial there. Miami, though, I think could be one of the teams that maximizes Josh Giddey. One thing the Heat are lacking is a true floor general type point guard, someone who can be a assist monger, someone who's going to rack up assists, create offense for others a ton and consistently. Obviously, Hero plays in that role a bit. Jimmy Butler has played in that role a bit. Bam Adebayo does a good amount of creation for others. But I think Josh Giddey specifically would be their best ball handler, playmaker, and I think he would probably maximize himself. Just having more of an on-ball role and responsibility there with the Heat would probably turn him into a stats freak, someone who's going to probably average 15 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. If you have the ball in his hands frequently, you also get a big-time upside swing here on Ousmane Dieng, former NBL prospect. Obviously hasn't gotten a ton of run, but he has all the length, size, and some of that shot-making potential still. So that's a good upside grab here for Miami. You get 3 first-round picks. One of them is a lottery pick this year from the Houston Rockets. You also get the 2025 first via Philadelphia, and that 2027 first via Denver. So these assets aren't the greatest collection of assets, but they are 3 first-round picks. Gives Miami some of their flexibility back. Perhaps they could go out into the trade market with those 3 first-round picks, try and make another move, maybe reroute Terry Rozier somewhere with those 3 firsts to accumulate more talent and maybe find another wing or forward that fits into your roster construction. And for OKC, I think it's pretty evident. Jimmy Butler is one of the few stars in the league that could just flat out fit into any kind of roster around him because he's a two-way player who doesn't need the ball in his hands a ton. I think he would bring a kind of a grit and toughness to OKC that they already have a lot in their roster, but he would also give them some of that veteran mentality, especially in the postseason. Now, OKC has not struggled at all in the playoffs at the time I'm recording this, but the deeper you get, the more talent you need and the more maturity and experience you need. Jimmy Butler could definitely work for that reason there in Oklahoma City, excuse me. And I think they are one of the few teams that they have so many assets. This doesn't really hurt them long term like it would other organizations making a big time trade like this for Jimmy Butler. Trade number 4, the New York Knicks, and Tom Thibodeau, for the 3rd time in his career, would coach Jimmy Butler. Remember, coached him in Chicago, traded for him in Minnesota himself, and then also now gets him in New York in this deal. And this is probably one of the best deals for the Miami Heat because this is the best player you will realistically get back for Jimmy Butler from a long-term timetable perspective. Randall, at 29 years old, former All-NBA player, multiple-time All-Star. He puts up big-time numbers, and I think he does fit the way that Miami likes to play. He's big, strong, physical. He can get on the glass. He defends pretty well. I think he fits next to Bam Adebayo as a very unique 4-5-man combination. So I do think Randall would be a really good get for the Miami Heat in a return for Jimmy Butler. On top of that, you also get Bojan Bogdanovic, who has an option for next year that the Knicks will likely pick up so that they can trade him. That's where we would see it this offseason. And a 2024 first-round pick via Dallas. So that pick is in the 20s. I believe it's pick number 24. It's not the greatest return for Jimmy Butler in terms of a draft pick compensation, but it gives the Heat another chance to maybe add a little bit more young talent while also just pivoting from Jimmy to Julius Randle. And for the Knicks, I think this is pretty clear and concise why you would be willing to do this. First of all, they just beat the Philadelphia 76ers pretty convincingly, I would say, in the first round in 6 games, without Julius Randle playing a single second. It is Jalen Brunson's team. The Knicks, around Jalen Brunson, have a collection of two-way players who defend, they get rebounds, they just do a lot of winning things. Dante DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart obviously made some crazy big shots for the Knicks in that first-round series. The Knicks are really good. And if they pivoted from Randle and Bogdanovic into Jimmy Butler, it gives them just one more player who does a lot of those things as a two-way winner, someone who just gets involved in plays just at meaningful times. And honestly, Jimmy Butler is just a better playoff player than Julius Randle. Randle's play style, especially when the whistle gets a little bit stale in the postseason, when they don't call the whistle as much as they do in the regular season, Randle's efficiency and effectiveness just dwindles a little bit. And I think for New York specifically, that upgrade from Randle into Jimmy Butler, even though he's older, even though obviously the tenure with Tibbs last time didn't end super well, still would make a ton of sense for New York given his ability to perform in the postseason and his play style. I think just fitting what New York likes to do, Jimmy plays in similar ways to Julius Randle as a mid-range shot creator, someone who can get a bucket in isolation but also can play without the basketball at times. Jimmy probably helps the Knicks quite a bit in the playoffs, especially for a team that at some point is going to have to get over the hump against the Boston Celtics in the future. The more top-end talent you have, the better. Jimmy Butler, this doesn't cost them a ton of future draft picks. This keeps their flexibility alive, and it just fits into the way that they like to play basketball regardless. Trade number 5. This is the one that probably is the most likely, and it is a deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. I hope you guys like my jersey swap of Jimmy back in a 76ers jersey. It's almost like he played there before, and then they chose Tobias Harris over him. Definitely an interesting choice. But the Sixers get Jimmy Butler. The Miami Heat get nobody other than draft picks. And you might be saying, whoa, all of those other teams had players coming back, like Wiggins. They had, obviously, Julius Randle. You might be saying, why would Miami want to do this? First of all, I've harped about Miami's financial situation. This kind of gets rid of that entire problem. This allows Miami to continue to retain all of their core pieces other than that top-end number 1 player like a Jimmy Butler. And that's obviously the toughest thing to get, but that's why you're getting all of these draft choices. You're getting 3 first-round picks, and some of them have some serious upside. That 2030 first-round pick via Philadelphia could be really, really good with Joel Embiid's injury history, Jimmy Butler's age. That pick could be very, very valuable. You also have that 2028 first-round pick from the Clippers, from the James Harden trade. That has a ton of value, obviously, if you hold on to that and wait on it a bit. The Heat could be getting a ton of top-end talent at the top end of drafts if they hold on to those picks, or they could leverage those selections into trades to bring in other top-end talent over the next couple of seasons as well, while kind of resetting their financial picture. You also get a few second-round picks. With the new second-round exception, those are more and more valuable than ever before. So getting 3 second-rounders and 3 first-rounders for a 34, about to be 35-year-old Jimmy Butler is good value in my opinion. I would not be willing to trade 4 firsts, 4 swaps, anything crazy like that for Jimmy. So if you're getting 3 firsts and 3 seconds, you have to think you're doing pretty well. And for Philadelphia, the reason you do this, some Sixers fans are going to say, well, if you are kind of hesitant on trading a ton for Jimmy, why should we? There's immense pressure on Daryl Morey this offseason. They have intentionally gone about opening up cap space. They traded Harden for all expiring contracts. They traded for Buddy Hield, who was an expiring contract. Everything they have done has been centered toward the 2024 summer, with the idea that they're going to add not only 1, but perhaps 2 max-level players in the offseason. Guess what? Your cap space, well, Pascal Siakam likely won't be available. I'm sure the Pacers will retain him using his bird rights. So how do you go about adding talent? And for Philadelphia, if it's not through free agency, it has to be through trade. And they do have the assets to get something done. And trading for Jimmy Butler makes sense. Jimmy, first of all, has a good relationship with Joel Embiid. The two of them obviously played together in the past. I think Butler enjoyed playing with Embiid. And I think the two of them could formulate a good winning team in Philadelphia. You think back to the 2019 playoffs, Kawhi Leonard, Game 7, hits a crazy game winner against the Sixers. Obviously ends Butler's tenure there, but that team was really close. They were actually really, really close to being a title team. And who knows, if they ran it back, if the Sixers committed to Jimmy Butler, maybe the Sixers would have a championship by now. They obviously don't. A lot of things have gone wrong for Philadelphia since losing Jimmy Butler in free agency to Miami. But the Sixers are still in a spot where if you're able to get Jimmy Butler, you feel like with him, Maxey, and Embiid, you have a serious big three that is capable of getting to the conference finals for the first time in Joel's career, but also perhaps getting to the NBA finals and then even winning it, because you have the premier talent from your top 3 guys, and then from there, role players, a bunch of veterans would want to be on that roster with a chance to win an NBA championship, play around high caliber players, high quality players for a very high quality coach in Nick Nurse. Jimmy Butler makes a ton of sense for Philadelphia. I think this is the most likely landing spot for him. Daryl Morey is in constant pursuit of stars, and Jimmy Butler fits that profile as well. I want you guys to comment down below your favorite mock trades, whether that be from the video or your own, for Jimmy Butler. So send me some mock trades. I thought about the Dallas Mavericks as a potential landing spot. I've thought about a bunch of teams in this video. I landed on the 5 that I shared. Obviously, Sacramento could get involved. You never know about Atlanta with DeJounte Murray and or Trae Young. Does Miami make something happen there? Oh my goodness, if they do. And then will Jimmy Butler actually be traded? I want you to comment down below. I think Jimmy will or won't be traded. So let me know down in the comment section below what you guys expect to happen with Jimmy Butler this offseason. I really do appreciate all of you for watching. You guys are the best. So thank you so much. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more NBA content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.